Oh, this is gonna be crazy. That was great. Alright, hello everyone and welcome to another episode of SpraynPray1000's Verdict, starring me, SpraynPray1000, where I review new games soon after they've come out and I've done playthroughs on them. Okay, so in today's episode we are going to talk about God of War Ascension, the latest in a long series of beat-em-up hack and slash games made by Santa Monica Studios for the PlayStation 3 and, well, PlayStation 2 and PlayStation Portable for other games. And today, God of War Ascension is basically a prequel to all the God of War games, as opposed to, God of War games have progressively built upon the series, except for the PSP games, which have, gone in and filled in some of the blanks, along the way. And, God of War Ascension, it's interesting as well, because it's the first God of War game to actually include some form of multiplayer, and that's never been attempted before in God of War, as I just said. And it's interesting because, how could they take what is, predominantly a single-player franchise, well, actually solely a single-player franchise, and adapt, the whole hack and slash method to an online platform. And, well, what do I have to think about this game? Well, first things first, what I'd like to say is that let's jump into the story first, okay? So let's jump into the single player experience. The single player of this game is actually, believe it or not, very similar to all the other God of War games that you have played. The set pieces are pretty much there. Your control scheme is, pretty much stayed the same, although actually for the first time they've really actually changed the control scheme in some ways. I'll get to that, more on that later. But for the most part, the game pretty much plays, very similar to all the other God of War games. It's a pretty linear game. Your goal is pretty much to, once you're in an area, to kill everyone around you, become victorious in that aspect, look around, solve puzzles, and, basically platform your way to the next segment of the game. And, there's some puzzle sequences. There's a lot of times where you'll be in an area, you can't solve the puzzle right away, so you need to go around and do something else, and then come back, and then you'll be able to do the puzzle. And, it's just a whole bunch of different stuff like that we've seen before in God of War games. Now, the main meat of the game, well, the main meat of the single player is, the story experience, okay? The story experience, that, because everyone kind of, either you love the God of War story or you don't, you're indifferent on it. Okay, so God of War Ascension is a prequel to the previous God of War games. You play as Kratos, predictably you play as Kratos, who at this point has already forged his well, obviously I'm gonna have to say some stuff about the story. He's already forged his bond with the Greek god Ares, and at this point, he served under him, and then the tragic event happened that caused him to despise Ares and basically want to break his bond and then remove himself from his servitude. Now, the game actually, now I'm not sure if I was the only one expecting this, but when I heard that this game was going to be a prequel, I at least expected, that it would include the events that led up to Kratos deciding that he's done with Ares, because before that's only been established in cutscenes. So I don't know if it was just me, but I kind of expected that they would at least have that, somewhat playable, maybe like as a prologue to the game or something like that. That didn't come to pass. Rather, the game sort of starts, actually the game sort of starts in medias res, and then the majority of the game is pretty much playing in the previous weeks before Kratos, before the main story. And Kratos is basically trying to find a way to free himself from the power of the Furies, who are tasked with ensuring that all the blood oaths to the gods remain faithful and they're not broken. And obviously, since Kratos wants to break his blood oath, he's, become a problem to them. They definitely want to try and keep him in line so that he doesn't do that. They're tasked by Ares to do so. And, they're basically the main enemies of the game. Now, this might just be me, but this game kind of, at least story-wise, feels a lot like a PSP God of War. Like, it's not exactly like, a big story like some of the other God of War games. It feels more like the story of, like, say, Chains of Olympus or Ghost of Sparta, in that regard. But without a doubt, they definitely sort of went along with some of the stuff that they did in God of War 3, in terms of, like, the presentation. Obviously, the graphics, there's no way I'm trying to say this is like a PSP sort of ordeal. And really, at least for the most part, they did a really good job of interesting me. I thought that the story, even though, it didn't exactly deal with what I'd come to expect from them, at least for the most part, it was still pretty interesting. There were a lot of twists and, a lot of different things I didn't expect to see in the story. Now, bear in mind, there's some stuff about the story and, even worse, some stuff about the gameplay that wasn't exactly 5-star. Like, at this point, God of War kind of feels almost like similar to, Assassin's Creed and Gears of War. It feels more like they made this game almost out of, just to keep the franchise going, rather than, to actually sort of take it in a different direction that we haven't seen. Because for the most part, this game is just pretty much, your standard God of War experience. There's not really, nothing much has really changed in terms of the single player. And especially gameplay-wise is really kind of, where it kind of takes a sour turn. For example, this game is, at least from what I felt, this game feels a lot harder than any previous God of War installment. And now there are some things I do like, there are some things I don't like about the game. For one, and probably my biggest complaint, it's the fact that it feels like they changed the guarding and the dodge mechanic. I don't know why, it just feels delayed in this game, and that just really doesn't bode well in a game, because it's already been slow in previous God of War games, guarding and everything like that. And it just again, it's just like I don't really know what to say too much about it, besides the fact that it's not horrible, but at the same time it feels like it could definitely use some work. There's no attack canceling. There's some weird stuff where you'll push a button and then you'll push another button and the second button will come out first. Like, the response time on that button is faster, and it's just, I don't know, it just wasn't as well executed, as compared to when I played God of War 3. I didn't have that much of a problem with it. I thought it was pretty well done. I played through all of God of War 3, and I don't have any memorable problems other than the auto-saving thing. Other than when it froze my console, it wouldn't stop loading, and, that just almost screwed me over, because that was the one time I didn't save my game. Now, in this game, the game actually auto-saves. There are no more traditional God of War yellow save points. Instead, what happens is the game auto-saves pretty much at every big encounter. And, since it auto-saves pretty frequently, pretty well, you're pretty much free to move on, and it's not that bad. In fact, the autosave, besides the one part of the game that I'll come to later, the autosave was very reliable, and I thought that it was really well done. I like that addition, although I do kind of miss the save points just because I miss saving myself. But it's all good no matter what, so it's not that bad. Now, let me talk about the actual combat. Now, in this game, you pretty much have your same standard combos as before. Now, what has changed is now whereas all the grab stuff was bound to circle, they have changed that. Now all the grab stuff is actually bound to R1, and R1 is actually, you can use it during combat to latch on to enemies and have them stuck on your chain while you swing at them, or you can swing at other people. You can throw them using triangle. Circle has been changed to melee attacks like kicks and disarms. You can knock a sword off of somebody by kicking them. And also, there are now weapons in the environment you can pick up. So, for example, you can pick up spears, you can pick up slings, you can pick up swords, hammers, clubs, you know, all this kind of stuff. And you can mess around with it. So, like, you can actually blend it in with some of your combos. You can specially discard it, which will get rid of the item, but usually it does a special effect. And I think that was good. I think it was good that they, you know, tried to find ways, you know, to make Kratos seem a bit more interesting by giving him a diverse move set. And that was one of the things I liked about the combat. What I didn't like, however, was the fact that the Blades of Chaos, which are pretty much the only main weapon you get in the game, just pretty much what they did is, instead of giving you different weapons in this game, again, they kind of pulled a PSP God of War, and they said, well, your only real weapons are the Blades of Chaos, and you switch between different elements that you get throughout the game. So, for example, you get the Fire of Ares, you get the Lightning of Zeus, the Ice of Poseidon, and the Souls of Hades. And a lot of them kind of felt worthless, like they really weren't that well. You know, they didn't work that well when you were in combat. You know, you just kind of, they were just there just to be there. And especially a lot of the magic, especially the magic of Hades, did not seem that useful at all. Now, during, now actually, each different element gives a certain amount, it gives you back something every time you kill an enemy with it. You know, it increases the likelihood of something dropping, especially when you use the special ability that goes along with that element. And some of those abilities, they just were not that good, and they weren't that damaging. Again, it might owe to the game being a lot harder and enemies having more health, and it's not that much balance. And it's like, so for example, Zeus's lightning, when you fill up your rage meter and you click both sticks, it causes you to start pointing the blade, and it's pretty much, you point it and lightning arcs out that way. And initially it's pretty good, it does a lot of damage, you can definitely trap a lot of people in it, but for the most part it doesn't really help that much, especially considering that the rage mode in this game is not helpful to begin with, in my opinion. I thought that the rage meter was kind of, they had it really good in some of the God of War games, and then they tweaked it a little bit, and now they really just kind of discarded everything that was good about it and just turned it into something that's like not helpful in almost any scenario. The way you fill your rage meter is by constantly attacking and attacking and attacking and dominating your enemies. But if you get hit, it goes down. And if you don't attack and you don't have anything to kill within a certain amount of time, it completely depletes. Which, again, some of that's good. But also, since the blocking and dodging is delayed and imperfect, you know, that you're going to get hit more often, and it's going to be hard to pull this kind of thing off. Now, the parrying in this game is a bit different than before. Instead of, you know, blocking normally, like, you know, in God of War games, where you would just time your block and then you would automatically parry, in this game you actually have to hold block and then press X, and you'll cause like a circle to go around you, and if anything attacks you while that circle is well, it's a sphere. If anything attacks you while that sphere is active, you'll automatically parry, and then you'll retaliate, and then you'll open them up for more attacks. Here's the problem. There's a couple things with it. Now, one, the timing window seems a little bit very small. And now, again, you'd have to kind of master that, and I ended up not doing so well with that, but with a lot of practice, you could probably really get it down. That's not the problem I have with it. The problem is that the parry sometimes misses if an enemy is, you know, slightly out of range. You know, if he's a bit far away, but close enough to attack you and trigger your parry, but not close enough to, you know, take the brunt of it, you don't seem to charge toward them anymore. It kind of just tends to miss, and that definitely doesn't help in, you know, situations where you do get the parry off. You do want to reverse, you know, the way the fight's going, and it doesn't seem to do anything, and you're left on your own. In addition to the fact that the rage meter seems kind of worthless, you kind of lose your edge in combat. On top of the fact that your defensive abilities are, you know, just nil, kind of just not as helpful as they were in previous God of War games. Now, you can block better in this game, but again, it's like you know, the blocks are delayed. Either the enemy, you know, a lot of these heavy big enemies, which you would think would, you know, attack a lot slower and telegraph their attacks better, they don't. They kind of just, you know, instantly kind of hit you, and you know, between, you know, the delayed block and the fact their attacks are so fast, you really don't have much of a time to counterattack, which is not going to help you out in a big, prolonged fight. Now, in addition to that, some of the elements seem a lot more useful than others. Now, Zeus's lightning is the one I ended up, you know, kind of siding with the most. Basically what it is it causes lightning to arc out from your attacks, which is very helpful, especially with the heavy attacks. There's a certain combo that causes enemies to be stunned, and they won't be able to, you know, retaliate against you. And on the other hand, I have to excuse me because my throat's pretty dry right now. You have stuff like the Fire of Ares that doesn't really seem to help you out that much. And now Hades Souls, I'm kind of on the fence about, because I do think it would, like, some of the combos with it are pretty good. And I think it's a bit better than Poseidon's Ice, but the magic is terrible for Hades. It's like a 12 hit, not much damage. It doesn't really do much to them. And by the way, I had my stuff pretty much fully upgraded. The only thing I didn't upgrade were the 2 additional items that you get later on that don't really help you that much. One, they're pretty much used for solving puzzles. And for the most part, I thought that it was kind of, you know, lame that, you know, some of this stuff isn't as good as what it is. The combat is really kind of, you know, subpar compared to other God of War games. And, well, actually, while I'm talking about the items, you get an item, right, that lets you reverse, basically show the life and death of an object, and you can either, you know, reverse its transformation from life to death. So you can either, like, fix something, or you can tear it back down, and it's used for puzzle solving. Really, it's a very confusing item to use because of the way that it's programmed. So what you're supposed to do is hold L2 while near something you can mix with, you can mess with, and you'll automatically start looking at it and start messing with it once you press square. And then from there, you either move the right stick left or you move it right, you know, to either fix or tear it down. And at one point, actually, during the tutorial of said object, the game actually had a bug. The camera got stuck during the tutorial while I was trying to learn this thing, and it would not fix itself. Even when I reloaded checkpoint, even when I quit the game and restarted, the camera was still bugged. So what I ended up doing, thankfully, what they did with this game is they let you play from a chapter, because, you know, this game is all auto-saving. You don't have to play through the entire game. You can just select a chapter you want to start from, and you'll start from there. So that was able to undo the glitch, because I was actually getting scared because the glitch wasn't fixing itself, and I wasn't sure what was going on with that. So I'll give them points for, you know, having a very good save system. At least, you know, the save system is good, but the camera is definitely, you know, something that's lackluster, and it wasn't that. Again, the whole game kind of feels a little bit subpar to what I'm used to. And on top of that, there was actually a very funny glitch that happened to me during the playthrough. At one point, I was, you know, zipping around doing the usual platforming segment, and I pressed R1 to see if I could move something, and I ended up, like, teleporting backwards, and the camera just, like, sped the fuck out of where I was climbing, sort of into the skybox. You could see where the map wasn't rendered, and then it sort of zipped back. So I'm not sure what's up with that. It feels to me like the game isn't that well tested. And here's another example. The game has a lot of audio bugs. There's a lot of glitches with the audio. Sometimes you'll be fighting a battle, and then the music will just, like, stop and then, you know, start from somewhere else. There's no looping. You know, it's not well blended in, and sometimes the music will just stop. Sometimes there won't be proper sounds during a fight. So it's like they didn't even, you know, try to investigate the actual, you know, music. Like, when they played through this game, were they aware that the music stops? Because it happened to me numerous times throughout the playthrough. And I hate this, because now I like the God of War franchise. I thought God of War 3 and Ghost of Sparta were amazing. And then I just played this game, and it's just so lackluster. There's nothing, you know, unique about it. It sort of feels more like a generic beat 'em up. And now, yeah, you could say that, you know, Kratos is a love or hate character, but at the same time, this, you know, there's nothing in this game was that particularly impressive. Now, the other thing about it, and I really want to get off of this, is that it just feels to me like a lot of the... Now, before in God of War games, the way you used to do QuickTime events is that, you know, obviously the button would appear on screen and you would press it. Now, in this game, you know, they just still do the standard face buttons during a fight. You still alternate L1 and R1. And what they did bring back for 1 point in the game, and 1 point only, and never again did they bring it back, were the directional stick buttons. Okay, and what happens is an icon will appear on the screen, like, you know, a half stick rotation that you're supposed to do with the left stick. That'll appear on screen, and you're supposed to rotate the stick to match it. That only appeared for one instance in the game, and guess what? Contrary to what they've done in every single God of War game, they decide to randomly put that on the side of the screen with no notice. And, you know, that's not, again, that's not God of War formula. There was no notice that that was changed. There was no notice with any of that. You know, you're just supposed to see that immediately. But that's a small thing compared to what I'm about to say. Now, usually when you finish off enemies in God of War, you just do the quick time button activated by, you know, pressing the grab button, and then you follow the on-screen prompts. You kill the enemy, you get rewarded, you move on to the next enemy. Now, in this game, what they decided to do was they decided to add more player interactive sequences than quick time events. So, for example, a lot of the enemies like the wyverns and the gorgons, what they do is when you initiate the quick time event, you actually are able to slash at them with your blades of chaos. So like pressing triangle or square is going to have you slash at the enemies constantly, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and you have to use the stick to dodge their attacks. Now, this will be an interesting mechanic. The problem, it's too simple, and it just feels like it's just added in there. For example, basically every attack that they launch at you can just be dodged by holding left at the right time, which they slow down the actual attack for and highlight it, and you just dodge it, you move on, and you just keep mashing triangle and square. You do it once or twice more, and then you're done. You kill the enemy, you move on. Now, it's kind of flow breaking. It doesn't exactly feel natural. You know, it just feels like, okay, we want to add something, so we wanted to sort of mix it up, and it kind of just feels bland after a certain point. It was cool the first couple of times, you know, I did it on some of the enemies, and then it just became like sort of a chore. Especially, the worst part of the game is a trial towards the end of the game where you have to fight 3 difficult fights in a row with no checkpoints and no healing. And in fact, that segment was so horrible that they actually had to nerf it and make it a bit easier for people on normal difficulty. Now, I know God of War games get hard. I know that, you know, they're supposed to be difficult towards the end. But this was just, again, I played all 5 of the previous God of War games, you know, within the past month. I had never been so stuck in a segment before that I just don't even know what they were thinking when they made that segment. Again, it's like, did they even play this game after they, you know, finished developing it and, like, said, okay, this is what, you know, the average God of War player is going to enjoy? Because I don't even want to fucking attempt that on Titan. I've been, you know, trying to play God of War Ghost of Sparta on Titan. That's already giving me a run for my money. Of course, on the PSP, because I have it on my PSP to go. And I don't even want to attempt that. I had so much trouble just on normal, you know, dealing with some of the hard enemies, because they made a lot of these enemies extremely annoying and extremely hard to, you know, to deal with. And I'm like, you're not Devil May Cry. You know, it's not like I have, you know, style and skill. These enemies are going to be easy. No, these enemies are just kind of difficult and just annoying to be annoying. So I can't give them that many points for the single player. I was pretty disappointed with it. Soundtrack wise, besides the audio bugs, the soundtrack is still pretty good. Now, let's actually get to the real meat of it, okay? The multiplayer. The multiplayer actually was surprisingly well done. I was actually very impressed with the multiplayer. And I'm definitely going to go back to it, that's for sure. But, you know, at the time of, you know, me reviewing this game, I've only, you know, had one session of maybe like an hour and a couple minutes. But it was still one of the most refreshing multiplayer experiences I've had in the last, like, year and a half. So, without a doubt, the multiplayer, man, they definitely did a great job with that. I thought it was very well done. They definitely hit home with the multiplayer. It was just so well done. And wow, I was blown away. So, for example, they have your standard, basically what you do is in the multiplayer, which actually ties in with the single player at one point, which I thought was a pretty cool tie-in that they did that. You pick your allegiance to one of the gods, and that basically chooses your class. So, for example, if you pick Ares, you're more of a Titan. I mean, not Titan, you're more of a tank, you're more of a warrior, as opposed to Hades, which is who I chose. You're more of a rogue, you know, you're used to subterfuge and subtlety and stuff like that. I'm not sure. Zeus and Poseidon sound more like the
the magic using kind of people, and each class has its own special ability. So I like that. I thought that was interesting. And Hades, at least I knew Hades was going to kind of be my favorite. Especially, I liked Hades as a god, too. He was a pretty interesting kind of guy, good voice actor. So, at least the multiplayer is kind of original in that aspect. And now the different game modes are sort of like free-for-all. They have team death, well, then they have team favor of the gods. And what favor of the gods is, it's sort of like team deathmatch mixed with captures, with break chests for points, and with capture the objectives so you can hold them and gain points for your team. So it's sort of like team deathmatch and domination, and then, you know, a grab bag of, you know, just grabbing stuff around the map. Then there's also additional objectives to complete, and basically doing all these objectives adds to your total favor. And obviously once you reach 8,000 favor, you win the game. Now what I did like is they actually have small scale games. They have small scale team favor of the gods, small scale free for all, small scale like all these other game modes. They have capture the flag. They have all this interesting stuff, and I like it. And, you know, all these maps, they have you know, multiple levels. They have traps. They have, you know, classic God of War stuff that you would see in single player really is in the multiplayer. And hey, even though, you know, this multiplayer includes a level up system, I was level 4, you know, I was all these low levels, and I was at the top of my team. I was having a blast. I thought that, you know, even when I lost, and, you know, even when all this stuff happened, it was still a fun experience to do. Like, I enjoyed it as a game. It was a very well done, and I just said to myself, you know, wow, this multiplayer is one of the best multiplayer experiences I've had in a long time. So, overall, what would I give God of War Ascension? I mean, despite the lackluster single player, I think the multiplayer is really what's going to keep people, especially fans of the franchise, you know, really, really in love with this. And I don't know. So, ultimately, what would I give God of War Ascension? I would probably give God of War Ascension a 79 out of 100. It's not as, you know, as great as I would maybe have rated God of War 3 back in the day, or maybe even some of the other God of War games. But at least with this, with the multiplayer, was definitely the redeeming factor. The multiplayer definitely added a sizable amount of points to this game. You know, without the multiplayer, if they had just done straight single player, I would have probably given this game a lot lower, okay? We're talking like 5 to maybe 8, 9 points lower. But thanks to the multiplayer, this game was saved. I boosted its score up because I said the multiplayer was really well done. And, well, at least they didn't fuck up too much about this game. So, unfortunately, God of War, not a strong performance this time. You know, next time, let's hope that you really put a lot of time and, you know, in-depth study into your game. And, yeah, hopefully when you come back next time, you'll have something really good to show us. But this time, I was not that impressed with the single player. I thought it was just kind of tacked on to begin with. And, you know, the multiplayer, at least, a lot of times they just add multiplayers in these single-player franchises just to say we have replayability. But here, I can definitely say that it's fun, and I'm going to go back to it, and it's going to be pretty fun, I guess, when I come back to it. So, that's it for this episode of SpraynPray1000's Verdict. I hope you guys, you know, enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed the playthrough, too. And I'll see you next time with another verdict. Probably Gears of War Judgment. So, see you then. There you go. Where? Where again? Oh, shit. See, I knew there was nothing on the other side. There isn't even a real path here. Just a bunch of, you know, exposed beams that I can climb. There wasn't something down there, was there? What the? What? What the hell? This game is so bugged. This game is so bugged. No, that was the proof right there. I pray that that was on the video. That is the buggiest thing I've seen in a long time. Probably the biggest glitch I've ever posted on my channel. Oh my god. Forget it. If there's something down there, fuck it. They can keep it. That was ridiculous. That was like just pure untested nonsense.